a person who's a doer, when you add AI, oh my goodness, they'll really be working hard. But then there are some people who are naturally laid back a little. They don't want to do things. They just talk in meetings, say ideas, then after that, they stop at that. Now, whether you give them a million AI tools, those ones, AI won't be helpful to them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Amazing Product Chef Show, a product created by AirQo engineers. My name is Belina Maranko. I'm a front-end engineer at AirQo. And in today's podcast, we'll be discussing the anatomy of a product launch, where our guests will share with us lessons they've learned from shipping products from the concept to the release. Today's guest is Martin Bbaale, and I'm very excited to have him here because he's a leader in the space with more than 12 years of building software products. So he's led several successful product launches and he's mentored others. Martin, you want to say hi to the audience?
Yes, thank you, Belinda, for that amazing introduction. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how things go. As Belinda's mentioned, I've been in the business of software engineering and also releasing products for a good time, and I had quite a number of teams I'm part of, and also lots of recent launches that I've been part of accordingly. But again, from a software engineering perspective, it's also important to note that product launches are not just about things to do with perfect code and all that. There's a lot more. You have to do stakeholder management, also at the same time manage things that are the technical debts, but also knowing that good enough can actually beat perfect because there's a lot of iterative development that goes on for some of these products. But over to you, Belinda, and I'm excited to see how this goes. Thank you.
Awesome. When you look at the whole concept of a product launch, what is that one mental model that you use now that you wish you had when you were just starting out?
The mental model is more around ensuring that as you launch the product, you're actually focusing a lot on, you're actually almost selling the problem and not necessarily focusing a lot on the solution. Because if your problem is not convincing enough, however much your solution is good, you might not be able to get good uptake of your product, but also retaining users after your launch will be hard. So I'll look at spending a lot of time on falling in love with the problem, but also making sure that the intended people who you're launching the product to are also in love with the problem. So explaining the problem and making sure they clearly understand it is a hack to actually ensuring that whatever you say or whatever you do or whatever you're releasing or whatever functionality you're bringing to the table is actually making sense. So I think that's one I would highlight.
Speaking of explaining the problem, you led the Wazi Hub program and you were helping local founders build IoT solutions. And I imagine that a lot of the founders came to you when they were obsessed with their product ideas. So how did you force them to validate the actual problem before they spent months building the product? Did you have a specific test to see if an idea was valid?
Ah, okay. So from those programs, we had what they call it's phased from ideation to prototyping and then to market readiness. Those are the high level three phases that we look at. So during the ideation phase, of course, all ideas are amazing. People come in, then you review the ideas accordingly. And it's in the prototyping phase where you actually are able to see whether your idea makes a lot of sense in the process. So ideally, when you have a vision or a goal for your product, the vision might not change, but there's some element of flexibility in how you go about the implementation. The finer details might change according to new knowledge that you encounter. Along the way, along the journey of developing the product, there's a very high chance that you're going to discover new knowledge, things that you didn't know before, and you'll have to make adjustments. So there has to be some element of flexibility, and also you have to be willing to take in constructive feedback and act on it in a timely manner accordingly. So I think it's more around making sure that you interact more and more with your intended users and also being ready to so having a curious mindset on whether you think what you're working on is actually making sense. And the only way to be able to do that is to actually be in love with the problem that you're trying to solve. If you're just focusing a lot on the solution and not necessarily the problem, it would be hard for you to actually even take in feedback in a timely manner, but also it would be hard for you to adjust and be a little bit flexible in the details that are a composition of your particular product.
So, when advising a team in that scrappy idea phase, what's your definition of an MVP?
So an MVP, ideally, it's more around having the most core. So I think it goes all to the priorities, or rather, if you do some bit of planning prior to the development, in as much as planning is continuous in nature, but is that core level planning, and also during the ideation phase or conception phase, as you're scoping out the product, and you're focusing on starting with the why, of course, not just the what, as we talked about there is a need to be able to also identify the high priority user stories that without them, definitely the product may not make sense. So how you identify that is definitely after you've really understood the problem. They are usually those things that if they're not there, or features or functionality that if at all it's not part of the product, won't be able to survive. So I think the whole point is attaching priority levels to each of the functionality, or rather the user stories, and then you pick out a few of those high level that you have in your pilot. So if at all you have 5 user stories, and then maybe you could say the top 2, it's like an art of sorts, but I think the whole point of an MVP is to get started and test out the product in actual user base. So I think there may not be a specific number, but you can choose a few that you feel the product cannot exist without those ones.
Okay. Then moving on to the building phase, whenever founders or product leads are onboarding junior developers, they struggle with getting the junior developers to ship reliable code fast. So, what should I call them? Rituals? What specific rituals did you use, say, when you were at Andela, to get junior engineers to, first of all, stop thinking like students, because many of them are fresh out of the university? And how did you get them to stop thinking like students and start shipping like a highly skilled product team?
Okay, that's a good one. So when you look at a product, I guess especially when it reaches the point of the development phase, it's more there's a need to think to be user centric in all that you do. And majority of the juniors, or rather people just starting out, there's an element of, but it's not actually only the juniors. It also happens to people who've been working for a long time. There's a way a good number of people are taken up by trends. So focusing a lot of, I can do this, I can do that, I can use that programming language, I can do that, I can do left, right, and center, and not spending some time to develop a bigger picture thinking. So big picture thinking allows you to actually solve the problem better, but also at the same time, it improves your problem solving skills since you have a high level appreciation of what the problem is and what the potential and the connecting bits and pieces. So spending more time appreciating the bigger picture of what you're trying to solve also helps you to develop. It also improves your initiative skills because you'll be able to actually identify new things that might not even have been discussed in the ideation or planning phase, simply because you are really hooked in and you appreciate all the different angles of the problem you're solving. And then from that angle, you're also able to. So I think it's mostly around being user centric, making sure that you take in the feedback of the user, but also at the same time ensuring that there's some sort of an art. You may interact with just one user, and then you take that one user's feedback as what will be working for all users. So I think it's important to have a reasonable sample space, but also to not take feedback directly and implement it as is, but rather use it to inform your strategy, because some feedback can actually be refined a little bit so that it can be applicable for more other users. So I think it's more around continuously validating, first of all, the feedback, but also understanding the problem more through deeper research on your end too. Yeah, thank you.
You spoke about junior devs and many devs jumping onto the current emerging trends. Could you share more on how the landscape has changed from your perspective when it comes to all the new trends that have been coming up from the time you started developing and how those have influenced your software development journey or process?
When you look at the entire kind of landscape, you find that to develop anything, it was relatively harder in the past. And the beauty about software engineering, unlike other industries, the rate of innovation is really high compared to maybe civil engineering or and all the other fields. Here, the rate of innovation and also how to drive costs down during the entire development process, but also how to ensure that the developers are well supported, maybe they can work a little bit faster and better tools, better what the in the software engineering or computer science domain, innovation has really been so fast. So meaning being able to develop is relatively easier at the moment compared to the past because of the many tools that are in place. But then the foundational aspects of the industry have not changed in terms of quality, the quality outputs. There are quite a number of frameworks and principles that have to be in place to ensure that your code base is maintainable, but also at the same time being able to easily onboard new contributors to your particular solutions so that the continuity of product is safe. So when you look at all that, you'll notice that there are quite a number of frameworks that have been coming up in place, standardizations on how to do some things. Cybersecurity has been a very good, it's one of those aspects that there's always something new you encounter. So isn't really, of course, there's some foundational aspects that are really informed by scholars in terms of cybersecurity that we build on top of, but there's always something new. So when you look at the focus going forward in terms of the landscape, in the beginning, it was more around can you be able to develop this, develop that, using this technology, using this what. But now the conversation is slowly shifting towards quite a number of other things. Cybersecurity is coming on top, of course, but also being able to optimize your solutions to work best with the different. So I think we're going more into ensuring that from end to, because of the technologies like AI, which make development, which lessen or rather which are really helpful during the development journey. I think we are going a little bit back because in the past, people could be employed as software engineer and you could be doing everything. You'll be doing data science, front-end engineering, like there was no specialization. Then along the way, people started specializing so much, data engineering, front-end engineer, what. But then what I'm sensing here is that because of the emergence of these tools which help, which are very good, like the Copilot, the cloud code and all that stuff, which are helping people to develop, what I'm sensing is that people now we might go back to the previous, like 20 years ago, where you were just called software engineer and you do everything, data science, ML, what, because of these emergence of tools, and you could even be able to do hardware. So meaning right now, you scenarios where do we have many full stack engineers, people who are even going further to even develop for the hardware on which their software solutions sit. But then I guess also there will be a lot of emphasis. The way I'm looking at it right now, there's a lot of cybersecurity that is coming into play, but also testing and those best practices around testing. Because as you notice, many companies of recent have had many downtimes, many big companies which had global shutdowns of things. And software engineers came into play. There's also a need to kind of insurance measures, while also at the same time giving a lot of attention to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is going to be even a bigger thing going forward.
To dive deeper into the cybersecurity AI agents discussion, what advice do you have for founding software engineers who want to build a product? What advice do you have for them when it comes to AI adoption? I know I already talked about taking caution, testing, but could you just deeper into how best software engineers can leverage AI in a productive yet safe approach?
Okay. Well, once you have your foundational aspects in check, making sure that That because I think there's some foundational aspects when it comes to product or software engineering that you have to follow in terms of making sure that your code is testable, at the same time going above and putting automated testing procedures in place so you can still use AI to help you go about that, and also making sure that the foundational cybersecurity aspects, hashing and all that stuff are in place to ensure that the way you store your data, it's not easily accessible, but also putting in place at an infrastructure level. I think that's why it might be good for people to go to be end to end, whereby you actually have breadth of knowledge and not just in your particular product, and knowing all the aspects of your product. And when you go into that, it simply means that you're able to actually easily catch, first of all, observability, because now if you don't know what's happening within your system, it's hard for you to solve problems. So I think making sure that you put or logging mechanisms where you continuously monitor what's happening within your application, I think that would be something that it's mandatory at the moment. And it used to also be mandatory, but it's now even more mandatory. But then also at the same time, continuously, if you have ways of, so observability, logging, knowing what's happening, but also at the same time, continuously putting in place automated testing from the front end to the back end, automated testing procedures so that they can be able to catch, but also taking advantage of using a combination of AI technologies so that at least you can be able to get a wider, or you can be able to compare and contrast the kind of feedback or that you're getting from those AI tools can also be something that's helpful throughout the development journey accordingly. But I think what matters more than ever right now is having some element of, for any product, having a continuous team that's continuously looking at things, because now you see cybersecurity is very evolving. And if you don't have a continuous team around the product where people just met for a month, like maybe a hackathon, and then they develop something, and then after that, they go back to their lives, the shelf life of that product won't be that long. And because as cybersecurity things keep on changing, so if you don't have a team that's continuously checking threat models, going into all those details of cybersecurity, it will be extremely hard. Now, to conclude around the whole aspect of some of these topics like cybersecurity, it's very deep. Even when you do some courses on that, there's a lot that people do within the cybersecurity space that even just focusing on that alone within any product team, the workload can be really a lot. So also I think it's more around, for a successful product, it's important to have a dedicated team around that product, but also at the same time, look at the various aspects beyond just the perfect code, the what. There's a lot of orchestrating some kind of cross-functional teams, making sure that they are all aligned on how you're going about the product development, but also managing the stakeholders who are utilizing the product and also managing that feedback and all that. Yeah.
To conclude this segment, some experts say that I will soon take over and do everything that a software engineer basically does. And what do you think about those claims? And is there a stage from the product conception to release that you think AI has so far nailed, or we are a long way from AI achieving the goal of being a full stack engineer?
Yeah, true. I think it's a tool per se, in my opinion. AI is a tool, and you'll always need software engineers. I think we've seen this recent where they fire many engineers, then after they bring them back. Was it Salesforce? If you follow the news, where they're replacing many engineers with AI and then they brought them back. So at the end of the day, it's just a tool which simplifies, which helps, or which improves the productivity of the engineers accordingly. So unlike other professions, software engineering was very brain intensive, like in terms of the amount of work that people had to put in to actually, it was very, very time consuming, but also it was very mentally demanding. So when tools come in place to actually assist the software engineers, I think it makes life better. But then also at the same time, when you look at the whole aspect of software engineering, not just programming, there's a lot that is involved when you look at the topical foundations of software engineering, just managing even stakeholders, the requirements, managing the requirements, prioritization, direction of the product, scope of the product, and all the rest, the quality of the product, tracking the metrics of the product, and also, of course, most of the details, the nitty-gritty details of the core function of the product adjust with time. Like remember when the story of Instagram, the way it started, the current Instagram is not exactly the original. That's the first idea that the creators had. But then along the way, when they interacted with the users, things changed along the way. Then they had to switch the direction. But of course, as they're interacting with the users, that's also an element of software engineering. It's not just about writing code and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that are involved within the space. So putting that into context, and also using the example of medicine where these tools are always saying, oh, you are right. You've made a good point, the way they respond when let me say, Belinda asks it, hey, by the way, the answer you gave me, I feel like you missed something. Like, yeah, you're right. You're spot on.
Yeah.
Every time they have positive answers. Now, in such a world, I think there's a meme I saw where an AI robot operated a person. And then when the person woke up, like it was surgery, they noticed that the scar was not where that organ was supposed to, the organ that was supposed to operate, the scar was far from where that organ is. And then when the person said, hey, but yeah, you've operated on this, but how come the scar is the other side? The robot was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Let's repeat.
That's catastrophic.
Point. The whole point here is that I think they're just going to create even more opportunities per se for software engineers. I don't think they're going to take away jobs per se. But the only thing that perhaps I highlight in this is that it's going to create more opportunities for those people who are doers. By doers, there are people who, I don't know whether it's a personality or character trait. There are people who don't just stop at ideation, but they do things that they talk about, and they are very consistent, regardless of how they feel in the morning, whether they are sick or what. For them, their mission and vision in life is not obstructed by how moods or feelings. It's kind of purpose is more important, and also they're doers, but also at the same time they're results oriented. Now, such a person who's a doer, when you add AI, oh my goodness, they'll really be working hard. But then there's some people who are naturally laid back a little. They don't want to do things. They just talk in meetings, say ideas. Then after that, they stop at that. Now, whether you give them a million AI tools, those ones, AI won't be helpful to them. But also at the same time, AI definitely is not going to be that it can't start things. It's a tool. AI itself cannot start on its own. I don't know, maybe in the future, but starting and like let me say, let's create this, let's do what. It's a little bit, I think there's a level at which humans are way above, but also at the same time appreciating the fact that it's just a tool. It's going to create more opportunities, and it will take away the jobs of those who are not doers. I don't know how to describe them, because if you're just in an organization or you're just there or seated, you don't initiate things, you're not hooked to your profession. Along the way, even the people who work with you, because they feel like every work they're doing all the work, then clearly they'll be like, now what's the importance of this person when I'm doing all the work? Then they'll be like, you know what, you go from here, I'll just work with my AI, and maybe we. But then the thing is, in an organization, the different roles. So you find that you can't be, in as much as they say that with AI, the number of people within an organization can be few, still you need a group of people, because you find that if you're an entrepreneur or a product, or you're marketing a product, going from meeting to meeting, physical meeting, you will not have time to oversee the actual development of things. Now, of course, one can say you put AI agents which observe things, and then they do what, they raise their own tickets, they raise PR as what. But again, from the example of a surgeon of a robot, you will need human oversight, especially at this stage in time. So meaning now the software engineers will now become like the doctors of the softwares, because even doctors these days, I went to a hospital sometime and they're also referencing online sources, and then they were able to actually diagnose. So meaning the online sources, it's not a doctor per se, but the doctor, because of their domain foundational knowledge, able to assist. Now, one thing perhaps is that might affect is those who are just starting out in the industry. How do you navigate this entire kind of space? Because now those who've been around for some time, whether even though it's 1 year, 2 years, at least they have some kind of foundational knowledge. They can be able to review the AI reviews and align it with the foundational knowledge, and then be able to see how to move forward. So for me, I think for all that I've said, I think it's just going to create more opportunities and not necessarily take opportunities. But it all depends on the people, yeah, accordingly.
Awesome, awesome. Let's talk about AirQo. You are the head of the software engineering department, managing the data pipelines for the largest air quality network in Africa. Governments, the public rely on this data. So the stakes are high. What is your definition of done? And do you have a specific checklist before you feel comfortable shipping to production? What does done feel like at AirQo?
I wouldn't say there's never a done per se. That done thing is more of a boardroom like thing because, yeah, it's not, you never really have it done, but perhaps there's the management of scope
Yeah.
according. So you find that there's what they call scope creep, where people continuously add, let's implement that, let's implement, and then at the end of the day, you don't have a managed scope. So I think scope can be managed. You can have it done in terms of scope of the product. But when it comes to done in terms of a finished development, I don't think you can have that because there's a lot of things you learn as you interact with the users. So you can have one feature, but the inner details of that feature will continuously change as you acquire new knowledge. Perhaps, yeah, so for me, there are two angles. You can have that done in terms of scope of the product, but having that done in terms of implemented, the finer details of the scope, I think keep on changing with new knowledge. So
Yeah.
you may not have an actual done there. Yeah.
So how do you handle the feedback loop after launch? Say a client asks for a feature that contradicts your product roadmap. Do you have a framework for saying no or prioritizing that request?
I think for the scope, it's important there's a high level goal of your product or your kind of, it could be a mission or what of the product, and that needs to be very clear. And now those inner details, there's a lot of flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, but again, you have to, the high level scope of the product should be the guiding principle behind every decision that you make. So if someone brings a new functionality accordingly, because people always come up with new things. So I think you can always refer them to that scope, clearly defined scope. And if that is not like a smaller detail under the scope, when it deviates far off from the scope, then you can ideally advise them accordingly. So I think it's more around documentation, first of all, in terms of scope and continuously referencing that documentation and also allowing others to, in case what they want to be adding on can be actually a product on their own, because also you find in any environment, people want to keep on creating. So what you do, like many other organizations, Google what, so they do spin-offs. And then that way you have others, if at all the resources are enough within the organization, then you allow that particular huge scope of things, because some people can present something like a feature, but it's actually a product with other features under that feature. So once that development of that is on the side, it won't bring problems to your particular development of the core product. So I think it's just management of stakeholders from that angle, I think helps a lot.
Okay. Let's founder in Kampala who's launching their V1 next week and they're listening in. What's that one non-technical thing they need to nail down before they ship?
Okay, non-technical. I'd look at ideally in your launch process, just focusing on talking about the problem only. Spend little time talking about your solution. I think spend almost 80% of the time discussing the problem. Make sure that you sell the problem, because if people don't see the problem, then it will be extremely hard for them to, however awesome your product is. So they won't really even revisit it or use it if they don't appreciate the problem.
Okay, awesome. Martin, this has been amazing. To conclude, looking at your journey, what part of the building process still brings you the most joy today?
When positive feedback, definitely from the users,
Okay.
positive feedback, but also at the same time when I also want to use the product accordingly, when I check it and it makes sense, I think it's how, for me, that brings me joy accordingly. So positive feedback, but also at the same time seeing active usage of the product, not just once or the other side. And perhaps also when you get feedback from users on how to improve, like active users, I think that's also something that shows that those users are engaged. Yeah.
Awesome. That brings us to the end of this first episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed listening, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app to stay updated. See you in the next episode.